So when you think about the end of World War I, you probably picture one big thing, right? The Treaty of Versailles. But what if I told you that was just the opening act in a much larger and honestly more tragic play? The way the war to end all wars actually concluded, well, it set the stage for an even deadlier conflict. Let's dig into how a whole series of treaties, not just one, redrew the world map and sowed the seeds of World War II.
So let me ask you, how did the Great War really end? And look, if you said the Treaty of Versailles, you're not wrong, but you're not telling the whole story either. Yeah, the real story is, well, it's way more complicated, and it involves a whole collection of treaties that literally remade the world.
Right, so there was no single grand finale. Instead, what you had were the victorious allies getting together at the Paris Peace Conference, and they hammered out 5 totally separate treaties, one for each of the defeated Central Powers. And these documents didn't just end a war, they completely dismantled empires and created brand new countries, redrawing the map of Europe and the Middle East in ways that, believe it or not, we're still feeling the effects of today.
And here's the full lineup. You've got Versailles, with Germany, of course, then Saint-Germain with Austria, Neuilly with Bulgaria, Trianon with Hungary, and finally Sèvres with the Ottoman Empire. Each one was aimed at a different country, but the big idea was that together they would build a new, more stable world. But, as we're about to see, the reality was a whole different story.
So let's start with the most infamous one of the bunch. See, the Treaty of Versailles wasn't just about Germany. It basically set this harsh, punishing tone that became the template for all the other agreements that followed.
Okay, so the terms for Versailles were absolutely designed to break Germany's back. Its army was slashed to just 100,000 men, basically a token force. It was stripped of valuable territory like Alsace-Lorraine. Its industrial heartland, the Rhineland, was demilitarized. But the real gut punch was the war guilt clause, which forced Germany to take 100% of the blame for the entire war. The idea, of course, was to stop Germany from ever starting another war. But what it actually did, it lit a fire of resentment that would burn for years.
Next up, the complete dismantling of an entire empire. I mean, the Austro-Hungarian Empire was this huge, complicated beast, right? So big, in fact, that it took 2 different treaties just to pull it apart. First, you had the Treaty of Saint-Germain. This one was aimed at Austria, and it basically shattered the old Habsburg Empire. It carved out new countries like Czechoslovakia and Yugoslavia from its territory, and, crucially, it had this one little clause that would have massive consequences down the road. It explicitly forbade Austria from ever uniting with Germany, a move they called the Anschluss. I mean, just look at the change. It's incredible. Before, you have this massive, sprawling, multi-ethnic empire, and after, a jigsaw puzzle of smaller nations. Austria was left as this tiny, landlocked country, totally cut off from its former industrial regions and just economically crippled.
So what about Hungary, the other half of the empire? Well, that's where the Treaty of Trianon comes in. And if Saint-Germain was the hammer, Trianon was the anvil. You could argue it was even more brutal. It carved away huge chunks of Hungary's historic lands, and in doing so, it created this massive, lasting problem. Millions of ethnic Hungarians suddenly found themselves living as minorities in brand new countries like Romania and Czechoslovakia.
Seriously, just let this number sink in for a second. 66%. Hungary lost 2/3 of its territory. Can you even imagine that? This wasn't just redrawing a map. For Hungarians, this was a national catastrophe. This loss created what's still known in Hungary today as the Trianon trauma, this deep sense of injustice that has shaped the nation's politics for over a century.
All right, let's shift our focus east now and see what happened to the other Central Powers, Bulgaria and the huge, ancient Ottoman Empire.
For Bulgaria, it was the Treaty of Neuilly, and really it was the same old story. Lose territory, pay up, and shrink your army. But the biggest hit? It lost its coastline on the Aegean Sea. That was a massive strategic and economic blow that pretty much isolated the country.
Okay, but the story of the Ottoman Empire? This one's different. This is a real game changer. The Allies' first attempt at a treaty, the Treaty of Sèvres, was so unbelievably harsh, it basically carved up the empire until there was almost nothing left of a Turkish state, that it actually kicked off a full-blown revolution. The Turkish people didn't just argue about it, they literally picked up guns and went to war over it.
This whole sequence of events is just wild. So, in 1920, you have the Treaty of Sèvres. It's on the books. But Turkish nationalists, led by the legendary Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, flat out refused to let their country be dismembered. They fought a war of independence, and against all odds, they won. So by 1923, the Allies basically had to come back to the table and sign a totally new treaty, the Treaty of Lausanne, which recognized the modern sovereign Republic of Turkey. It was the only time one of the defeated nations managed to completely flip the script and write its own peace terms on the battlefield.
So all these treaties are signed, the maps are redrawn. Did the world finally have peace? Well, let's pull back for a second and really look at the legacy of this grand and deeply flawed attempt to remake the world.
Now, on paper, you could almost believe it worked. I mean, 4 massive empires, the German, the Austro-Hungarian, the Ottoman, and the Russian, were just gone. In their place, you had new, independent countries popping up on the map. The defeated nations, their militaries were a shadow of their former selves. And to top it all off, you had the new League of Nations, which was supposed to make sure a war like this could never, ever happen again. This was the dream, right? A lasting peace.
But the reality? It was a nightmare waiting to happen. This peace was built on a foundation of pure resentment. The new countries weren't united. They were a messy patchwork of different ethnic groups, creating instant tensions. Those crushing reparations just caused economic chaos, which is the perfect breeding ground for extremist ideas. Almost right away, political movements dedicated to ripping up these treaties started to gain power all across Europe.
And that brings us to the ultimate tragic irony of it all. The peace settlement that was supposed to end all wars did the exact opposite. It created the perfect storm of anger and instability that led directly to the rise of figures like Hitler and the outbreak of World War II, just 20 short years later.
And it really leaves you with this huge, troubling question, doesn't it? When a peace treaty is all about punishment and not about healing, does it really bring peace? Or does it just light the fuse for the next, bigger explosion? You know, the lessons from 100 years ago, they feel more relevant today than ever before.